Good evening, everybody. This is Omar Serrato. I am joined by Lauren Neidigh, and I'm about to be joined by Adam Pitluk. We're going to discuss the case of James Scott. If you haven't heard about his case, there was a huge flood in Missouri back in 1993. By all accounts, by everything that I've been able to read about it, it was the failure of like over 1,000 different levees that failed, that led to the destruction of towns and caused various injuries. But they pinned it all on a singular man, James Scott. They convicted him under suspicious circumstances. And we're going to talk about all of that. But more importantly, I have the author of the book, Adam Pitluk. He is a PhD. And just to catch you all up, for everybody that's just walking in and has no idea what we're talking about, there's been a Vice documentary. It was a few years ago. It was witnessed by over 5 million people. And matter of fact, the author of that show was Adam Pitluk. At any rate, summer of 1993, the Mississippi River, it floods in 9 states. There's $16 billion worth of damage. 1,083 different levees fail, all during that flood. It was in West Quincy, Missouri. The levee had been holding back the river for about 90 days, but it was only designed to hold up for approximately 30. And so usually my understanding is, as an attorney and having worked on these kinds of cases, when you have a levee that's built to hold for 30 days and it fails after 90 days, that is a whole host of hundreds of potentially thousands of different people that are potentially culpable. However, they've tried to pin this on one man, James Scott. He was a local kid. At the time, I think he was 24 years old. There was a person that testified as to the motive. And I've been thinking about this a lot since we first discussed this case, like back on Sunday. The word was there was some 16-year-old kid that heard him say something to the effect of, hey, if the levees break, then the whole city will flood and I'll be able to stay and party a little bit longer. He was married at the time. That was the basis for the motive. There was other experts that were allowed to testify, and we're going to talk about them. But before we do that, let me introduce to you Mr. Pitluk. My next guest is the author. Well, number one, when this story broke, he was a 21-year-old journalism student at the University of Missouri. I think that's right. He was sent to the penitentiary by the editor of his magazine and basically said, hey, something's not adding up here. He's now an award-winning investigative journalist and a professor. He wrote the book on this case, Damned to Eternity. He made the Vice documentary that was viewed by 5 million people. And in 8 days, when James Scott is sitting for his first parole hearing, he's going to be sitting there next to James Scott as his family representative because both of his parents and his brother have long since passed. Adam Pitluk is here. I cannot talk. Adam Pitluk is here to join us on the show. Welcome. How you doing, Adam?
Very good. Thank you. And that was a great intro. Good summation. Your intro had more scientific data than the jury heard throughout the whole trial.
That's what I hear. And my understanding was there was expert testimony, and we'll get to that, but there was definitely expert testimony, but they had designated as an expert a farmer and an engineer, both who had different kinds of interests in the case, but none of them opined or was an actual scientist that was there specifically to talk about the engineering of the levees and why they failed and such and forth.
That's right. So to set that part up, first let me expand on one point. There were actually 2 trials of James Scott, which is also peculiar. The first trial in 1993, he was convicted of intentionally causing a catastrophe, which is a Class A felony in Missouri. It's a statute that had been on the books since 1979. And it was put on the books for forest fires, essentially. Missouri has a lot of timber and a lot of when there are droughts, all the pine needles and everything, it's like kindling. So essentially it was for forest fires. In 93, they kind of dug this law up and convicted him of causing a catastrophe. That case was overturned 4 years later because of prosecutorial misconduct. Essentially, the prosecution played fast and loose with the rules. They didn't follow jurisprudence. So his court-appointed attorney actually was successful in filing and receiving a new trial. The new trial was held in 1998, and it was moved to Hannibal, Missouri, which is in Marion County, Missouri, not too far from where this happened. And it just so happened that trial occurred when there was another flood going on. So essentially, the jury was exposed to a flood while they were talking about a flood at the time.
So they're a little sensitive about it.
That's right.
Right. Now, you said something very interesting in the Vice documentary. I heard you say something to the fact that, look, my goal was not to go there and free James Scott. I didn't even know who he was. Could you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, when I'm 21 years old and I'm working, so I was working for the Columbia Missourian, which is the learning laboratory for the journalism school at the University of Missouri. Even though it's produced by journalism students, all the editors are professional journalists, and the circulation is the entire county in Boone County, Missouri, and the city of Columbia, all the way down to Jefferson City, which is the capital. So we were really kind of thrown into the deep end to be real journalists while still learning the craft. The second trial had just concluded, and my editor, Sharon Harl, called me into her office. I was covering local government and true crime at the time. That was my beat, the cops and courts. And she said, get down to the prison and just talk to him, because I just watched this trial and it's not adding up. It's very strange that there was zero evidence, no physical evidence, only circumstantial evidence. And they not only convicted him, but they levied a life sentence, which is extraordinarily harsh when there were no deaths, no injuries. It was property damage. So I went down to the court, but when I did, I went down there to interview a guilty man. He was convicted. I had no reason to suspect that there was any kind of malfeasance or there was any misconduct at the second trial. So I went to interview a guilty man and figure out basically, why did you do it? You know.
So take me back there. It's 1998. You're 21 years old. You walk into the Missouri State Penitentiary for the first time. What do you remember about the room, and what do you remember about James Scott?
Yeah, I mean, I remember all these years later. I can remember it like it was yesterday, because what's really interesting, I did go to the Missouri State Prison, the Jefferson City Correctional Center. This was the old prison where he was originally housed. It was the level 5 maximum security prison that had been built in the 1800s, and it was at one point known as, I might get this a little bit wrong, it was like the bloodiest 50 acres in America. It was just a violent prison. James Earl Ray was there at one point, the guy that shot Martin Luther King. So, it was just this violent prison. And I go in, and it is, as a 21-year-old, never having been in any prison, let alone a level 5 max. I mean, it was right out of Shawshank. Everyone's screaming. There's a ton of noise, a ton of chaos. So they put us in essentially somebody's cube, like an office, a small broom closet size office. And the first thing I remember, though, is I'm 21, he's 24. I'm in the highest security level prison in the state of Missouri, and he's not cuffed. There's nobody around. Like they trusted him enough to not be worried about it. There was no chaperone. It was just me and him in a closet in a phone booth, essentially. So, I'm already thinking, like, at 21, I was a much more athletic and in shape person. I'm thinking, I'm with a convicted felon. Am I going to have to defend myself at some point? And right away, it was nothing like that at all.
So before that initial meeting, like, what was your understanding about what he did? Like, how was the story broken down to you at the time?
The way it was explained was that he was convicted on circumstantial evidence, no physical evidence, because of comments he made at a party. And let me footnote this. Not only did I not assume innocence, I actually assumed guilt. But I also thought, he is a bad guy based on his priors. When he was 13 years old, him and his brother burnt down an abandoned elementary school in town, the Webster School. So he was notorious in town from the time he was 13. Again, nobody died, but it was a lot of property damage. And, it was a historic old school. It was abandoned, but still. So what was told to me kind of jibed with that teenage arson, which was that he told somebody at a drunken party summers in Missouri, the boys would get together, drink a ton of beer, smoke a bunch of cigarettes, and watch St. Louis Cardinals baseball, and then just BS all night. So I was told he told some guys at a party that he was going to break the levee to strand his wife in Missouri on the other side of the Mississippi River so that he could continue partying in Illinois without her, which was a very sexy motive and a sexy headline, which made not only my editor interested in it, but the New York Times showed up, Washington Post showed up, ABC, NBC, CBS, all the news networks showed up. I mean, everybody was watching this.
And I talked to you like, just before the show, and I said, that sounds like the kind of thing that just a guy, he's over there drinking with his friends and he's just talking shit. It's just something
that's about it. Yeah. And frankly, because I was 21 years old at the time and a frat guy, I was very familiar with those conversations and in that geographic setting. So I got it.
Yeah. Your editor said that there was something that wasn't adding up. What was the first thing that didn't add up for you personally?
The first thing that didn't add up, number one, I mean, you alluded to it in the in the intro, but you put a real fine point on it, one that I hadn't been exposed to at the time, which was this was the 500-year flood. There had never been a flood this big measurably in America at all. So you have this historic flood. 1,083 levees broke that summer, and they only had one that was sabotaged, that was caused by a person. And the other thing is, I ended up going out to the levee to check it out after I interviewed him in prison to see what I had never been on a Mississippi River levee. I didn't even know what that was about. This thing is massive. It's a giant earthen structure. And in the run up to that flood, there were bulldozers running up and down it for weeks. There were thousands of National Guardsmen and volunteers walking up and down all the footfalls. There was other vehicle traffic driving along the levee. And the prosecution said that he caused it single-handedly in the matter of 5 minutes by moving essentially 5 sandbags from one area to the other. It's impossible. I mean,
it's just an absurd premise. Like literally, there was something similar, like the Palisades fires that happened out here in LA. That whole fire started because they had like this little bolt. I forget what specific part it was, but it was literally this bolt that had been there since like 1912 or something. Was supposed to have been replaced, like it was due for a replacement back in the 60s, and it was still holding up whatever was holding up this cable, and then it snapped. And then it's like, well, all right, who's to blame? Then immediately start checking the logs, and they say, yeah, these engineers, these maintenance folks, the electric company, all these different people. And so I read that those levees were only supposed to hold for 30 days, and they held for approximately 90 days. And then the story is because he allegedly moved some sandbags, that all of the levees were going to flood, causing all of this destruction. It made no. In my initial reading of it, I obviously know nothing, not nearly as much as you do, but it made no logical sense to me.
Well, that analogy is actually about as apropos as it gets, because that 1912 analogy, this levee was originally built in the 1920s. The original stem levee system was built by the Corps of Engineers in the 1920s and then built up over the years and raised up. So it was designed to hold back up to 30 days worth of pressure at 17 feet. The floodwater was at over 36 feet. So they had to double the size of the levee, and the only way to do that was to take bulldozers and push all the sand all the way up. When you do, and then stack sandbags to get it even higher.
Could I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Because as an attorney, this sounds like $100 million lawsuit against the city or against the state or against the government. Was there no civil lawsuits implicating anybody that was responsible for the construction or the maintenance of the levees, or were they just using this guy as the scapegoat?
Yes, and 100%. And the reason for that is because the finger pointing started right after it broke. So before James Scott was on the radar of the legal system to convict someone for doing this, you had the local farmers, the drainage district guys that were tasked or tapped by the Army Corps of Engineers to kind of babysit this levee in their absence. I mean, the Army Corps of Engineers, I think there's a misconception that they're responsible for all levee maintenance and all levee construction up and down every federal floodplain. They are to a point, but they can't be there all the time. So they basically deputize some local interests and local farmers in the drainage districts, and they're tasked with doing it. Jesus. As soon as it broke, the main farmer in charge, actually testified before Congress.
I was going to ask you, was that the guy that was designated witness in this trial?
That's right. And he just blasted the Corps of Engineers in front of Congress, saying that generationally, him and his grandfather and his father, like all of their family had been basically tasked with a Herculean undertaking of watching this levee to make sure it didn't break. And then for the 500-year flood to show up and they're still in charge, I commend him, actually. I mean, he had to make a snap decision. How do I keep the water from overtopping it when it's still rising? This thing's only built to construct, to hold back 17 feet. He bulldozed it up. I mean, seriously, you couldn't do anything else. You were throwing the kitchen sink at this thing to try to hold it back. So when he went before Congress and he made a compelling case, like, hey, the Corps didn't give me the tools I needed. They didn't give us the manpower. They didn't give us what we essentially would have needed long before the flood to be prepared.
How much of that ended up in the criminal trial against?
Zero. And it wasn't even introduced at trial that he had made that testimony before Congress, probably because it was in 1993. It was broadcast on C-SPAN. That video does exist. Yeah. But there was no internet, there was no social. I mean, unless we were watching C-SPAN in 1993.
Who was watching C-SPAN in 93?
No, I mean, and frankly, I didn't even find it until 2 years ago. And it wasn't me that found it. I've been researching this case for over 2 decades, and somebody else had to show it to me because you just don't think to look in the C-SPAN archives.
Tell me about Joe Flax. He was 16 years old, house arrest. You've been hunting him for decades. Tell me about him and your pursuit of him over the years.
Yeah, so that's really what was the nail in the coffin for this conviction, was that he was under house arrest. He was at that party as a 16-year-old. He was just kind of a hanger-on. He wanted to hang out with the bad boys, the guys that drank and smoked and just BS'd and watched baseball all night, a local kid. Yeah. But he was also kind of a derelict. So he was under house arrest for some other crimes he was doing. And out of nowhere, in the second trial, he didn't testify in the first one. In the second trial, all of a sudden there's this motive about it. He said he's going to break it to strand his wife in Missouri so he could party in Illinois.
So what was the motive in the first trial?
That's part of the reason why it was overturned for prosecutorial misconduct. Gotcha. They didn't notify the defense about any witnesses that would implicate James Scott.
So that's your question. Okay, so you hear that statement. Just assume you know nothing about the case. Let's just say that you and I are hanging out. It's like, oh man, I gotta go home, wife and kids, man. Hey, you know what would be cool if like there was a flood? And then it's like, hey, sorry, honey, I can't get home. I guess you got to party some more. I mean, play golf or whatever, or something like that. Something you just say to your, like, how does that comment strike you? Just objectively speaking,
that it's drunk guys talking, but they took it to the nth degree. They actually used it as motive. But here's the thing that they never mentioned at trial, and that the media decided to just kind of either purposefully leave out, or after the conviction, it wasn't worth following up. He never partied. He drove 7 hours out of his way. He had to go all the way north to Iowa, across the only working bridge the day after the flood to get into Missouri. And he picked his wife up and brought her home the next day.
Yeah.
That never was introduced. So, I mean, literally it's the whole thing. Once you remove the first card, the whole thing starts to collapse. I mean, that's why I stuck around this long, is because the morality of it all, but also the science does not support any of this prosecution.
Yeah, we definitely got to get to the science. But before I do that, with Flax, I remember watching the Vice documentary, and then at one point, like, you were going to interview him, but then he was asking for money. He's like, yeah, I don't really do that. And then he was just kind of being evasive about it.
I mean, I've chased this guy. Like, I've found him from time to time. he's keeping quiet for a reason. I mean, and he's not even in Quincy anymore. They pretty much ran him out of town. Like he's persona non grata there. He also broke the rebel badass code. I mean, all the people that were at that party are still there in Quincy, and they'll tell you that, yeah, we were all joking around. There was no intent. He didn't actually say, tomorrow I'm going to go break it. In fact, it was the opposite. He went and he volunteered.
Well, imagine also if every single one of us was held to the dumbest thing we ever said when we were drunk, we would all be in jail.
Yeah, but that's true. But I think what also needed to be introduced at trial, or if it should have at least this point should have been interrogated at least a little bit. Mm-hmm. Why was he at the levee? Now the cops that arrested him and interrogated him, actually, they said he was at the levee to do this thing, to break it. He was at the levee to try to redeem himself in the eyes of his community. He knew his reputation. He knew he was a bad boy. Every single the call for help went for everyone. All hands on deck. Come to the levee. We need help. He did it because he wanted to be seen. He wanted to make a big appearance. He wasn't nefariously or surreptitiously hiding to try to break this. He was talking to people. He was interacting with the Missouri National Guard and other volunteers. There's evidence of that. So, if he really was there to commit the ultimate perfect crime, he did a hell of a job staying anonymous. He was out there and open, and then he did a media interview. So again, another one of those cards that just falls on itself.
So 98 trial. Let's talk about Dr. Hammer. He was there, he was supposed to testify at the trial. He was supposed to offer a scientific explanation for the failure at the levees. And you sat through the 98 trial. What actually happened? What did you see that the jury didn't see?
Well, I wasn't at the trial. I actually did the interview after the trial when he was convicted. That's when I found out about it. But
correction of redactions.
Yeah, no problem. But it's an important point because guy's name is Dr. R. David Hammer. And there were two witnesses for the defense, two engineers. There was Dr. Hammer. I'll get into him in a minute. But there was another guy also, a guy named Dr. Charles Morris, who was a civil engineer from the University of Missouri, Rolla, which is a fantastic engineering school. Both of these guys were internationally known, actually, for their work in soil and atmospheric sciences and hydrology. Dr. Dr. Hammer was at the time a tenured professor and the chair of the department at Missouri of soil and atmospheric sciences, which was then and still is one of the best in the country. He's also a U.S. Naval Academy graduate from Annapolis. He was a combat Marine officer in Vietnam. He flew 100 combat missions in a Phantom aircraft, and then he came back to the States and got a Master of Science from the University of Illinois and a PhD from Tennessee. I mean, his credentials, he's beyond reproach. He was also tapped by the U.S. Agriculture Department to chair and head their soil science department. I mean, he was, and it still is, known in scientific circles as the guy. He and Morris testified that essentially there's 6 parameters that could deem a levee failable. If a levee meets any one of 6 different conditions, it could fail. Any one. This one met all 6. And Dr. Hammer then took a topographic map, the U.S. Geographical Survey map, showed it to 6 of his colleagues, just gave them the map and said, if this levee is going to break, where is it going to break? They all picked the exact same spot where it broke. He did testify, but the prosecution objected to his testimony. They called it hearsay because he wasn't actually there when it broke. He was trying to introduce peer-reviewed scientific studies, some of which he partook in, and others of which had been basically rendered as scientific scripture because they were published in the Journal of Science, the definitive Tier 1 journal. And they wouldn't let him testify. So they let him testify, but then upon objection, the judge wouldn't admit it. Like the judge wouldn't let the jury review it. So they heard no scientific evidence at all. That's why.
So I'm understanding that. And I asked you before the show, this has never been brought up on appeal. And I'm not sure if it's even appealable at this point.
The problem is, so that gets to the next layer. After his second conviction, now the court-appointed attorneys are gone. You can't appeal. You could appeal again, but they didn't know what to appeal since there was never any evidence in the first place. You can't. So basically, he had the jailhouse lawyer back in the late 90s file an appeal for him. It was rejected, and that's it. Game over. He exhausted his appeals.
Wow. Look, literally, this is the appellate issue. So an expert is allowed to rely on facts or data that is not admissible at trial in evidence if it's reasonably relied upon by experts in the field. That's been black letter law like since forever. It certainly was black letter law in 1998. And I'm fairly certain that it's still black letter law today. But the judge, from my reading of it, basically demanded that Hammer be an eyewitness to the science. And on that basis, deemed it hearsay and doesn't allow it or admit it into trial. That's fundamentally wrong. That is absolute a mischaracterization of the law.
Yeah, and it's an affront to every single criminal case that has ever introduced an expert witness. I'm not a lawyer, I should say. I did work for Court TV, though. I did a turn for them back in the late 90s, shortly after I graduated, and covered some pretty big trials for them. All criminal, every single one of them had expert witnesses, and not a single one of them wasn't admitted because they didn't single-handedly witness the science that they were testifying to. No, David Hammer testified in 21 trials in his career. This is the first time that ever happened.
Well, that's because he's applying layperson rules to an expert. An expert's allowed to do that. A layperson can't do that, but an expert can do that. And then you had mentioned like he wasn't allowed to hear the testimony of the farmer that was allowed to testify as an expert.
Right. They barred him from listening to the prosecution's witnesses.
I don't understand that. I mean,
well, they didn't want to refute because it would. I mean, this is why I try not to be a conspiracy theorist. I don't think this is a conspiracy. It's out there. It's open and notorious. It's obvious if you take the time like you have and look at the case file.
Well, could I be the conspirator, not the conspirator, no. Conspiratist?
Yeah.
Conspiracist? Whatever the word is. Let me just raise you this. I asked you the question about whether or not there was ever a civil case brought that would implicate the government or the people that were responsible for maintaining the levees, for building the levees, maintaining the levees, all of those things. And I don't think there was ever a civil case. And they had people that seemed to have conflicted interest in this case testify as experts. And they pinned this on James Scott. And the judge basically disallows Hammer's science. Look, I've been involved in a lot of criminal trials. Most judges are really good about, look, if the expert's here to say what they want to say, then let them say it. If you disagree with it, then bring in your own expert and they could disagree. This seems like a really big one. And they excluded his testimony on an incorrect application of hearsay objection. And then didn't allow him to listen to the other experts' testimony. I've never heard that. I've never seen that before. But I'll tell you what I know about Missouri. There's something fishy in Missouri with the way that they run things. I've never practiced in Missouri, but I've seen lots of cases just like this one, not just like this one, but similar to this, where judges and the prosecution or the state have vested interest elsewhere, and they just let things fly. And this case just stinks to high heaven of that kind of thing, which is all, and I've known about this case for 2 days, but that to me is the red flag that got my attention right away.
Well said. Let me bootstrap something of that as well. When I did the research for the book, which was published in 2007, so again, pre-internet was still just kind of like in its comeuppance, and there was no social media. When I did the research, and I did 10 years of exhaustive research for the book, all the people on the prosecution, I interviewed and talked to all of them in the book. I was not advocating for James Scott when I wrote it. I was just literally, and I say it in the acknowledgement section, doing a straight up objective piece, presenting both sides of the story and letting the reader make their decision. because I didn't know either at the time. I mean, I wasn't advocating. I was confused. I was basically getting all the evidence out there that people didn't know. And everybody talked to me in the prosecution. Since then, and this kind of undergirds the point you just made about how there's impropriety or irregularity.
Yeah.
Since then, nobody will talk. Nobody has said a word. I
Yeah.
can't get the cops. One of them, the detective actually that arrested him and interrogated him, that was a big part of the book, I actually texted him last night saying, I'm going to be in Missouri for the parole hearing. Maybe we should talk. And I know he read it because it says read, but then he didn't get back. Prosecutor won't get back. The judge, and all these people, this was a career-defining case for them. They all moved up the food chain, and now they won't talk. I mean, they got the only conviction of all time, for this law. They should be just chest thumping about it, and they went dark. They won't talk about it.
It was a case back in the 90s. It was a case that I'm sure a lot of people built their careers off of. It stands to reason that they'd want to reminisce about their great victory, and I think
if you win the championship game, you don't say no comment when they do the post-win interview.
Yeah. What do you think about all this, Lauren?
Well, with the parole hearing coming up, I think there was a couple things that Adam and I actually talked earlier, which is not something that's been posted yet. I have to edit the video, but he, I know, wants to stick by his principles, doesn't want to say, I'm sorry, I'm guilty of this when he's not. And also, Adam mentioned something earlier about this parole hearing might be like him and Jimmy sitting in a room on his, like a Zoom meeting. So it's kind of impersonal. So I'm a little worried about, there's a lot to worry about how that might go. It seems like an uphill battle for him to get out, even though there's all this evidence, or not even evidence, but like stuff to contradict what was said in the hearing, the trial, that would point to he should not be in prison for his entire life. But I know that some of you guys are planning to, I know you'll, Adam, be advocating for him, but also some people were planning to go, like, I think outside the courthouse and kind of be there for him. But how do you think this is, like, do you have any hope that he's actually going to get out, or do you think that is kind of, kind of a tough sell if he doesn't want to say, I did it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I can argue it both ways. On the one hand, I could see them finally letting him out because the publicity and the lack of evidence is basically caught up to them at this point. I mean, he was convicted in a more primitive time when you just didn't have access to the information. Yeah. Now it's out there. I mean, you guys are in California and we're talking about it. So, like, it's not just regulated to this regional issue anymore. Right. So I could see them saying, all right, you've done your time. By the way, as you mentioned, he's been a model prisoner in a level 5 maximum security prison for the last 33 years, like no infractions. But at the same time, they're not there to retry the case, the parole board. They're there to determine essentially if he shows remorse and if he's a threat to society. The threat to society box, you could check. He's not, because he hasn't had any infractions in prison, but he's not going to apologize. And so that's, I could see that could be grounds just kick him back up.
Mm-hmm. And I had the thought that, and you said, back in 2007, even social media hadn't really taken off yet. I don't think there was much of anything. I think it was like MySpace, and like.
Yeah, and I think Facebook. Well, I think that was still. I might get the timeline wrong, but if I remember, at that time, Facebook was still just for college students. I don't think it was open.
I remember that because I was one of those like high schoolers who somehow found their way onto Facebook and thought I was the coolest person ever. So yeah, that was around the time. And I'm wondering, do you think if social media was what it is now, that it would have made a difference back then?
Yeah, I don't even think this case gets brought.
Yeah.
One thing interesting that you mentioned, Omar, about that Vice documentary, it's had over 5 million views. I think it's actually closing in on 6 million at this point.
Yeah.
There's thousands of comments to which, you can't read them all, but just doing a cursory look at them, now the people leaving comments are not from the area. It's 99.9% like, what is this case? The only comments that actually are not pro James Scott are people that identify themselves as being from Quincy. And they're still really, really raw in Quincy about it all these years later. When I was there filming the documentary, you talk to anyone from that time, they still say, hang them from a tree. I mean, they can do without them.
Yeah. You had mentioned something to me earlier before the show, that somebody told you to follow the money. So let's talk about the insurance angle. What do the documents actually show about who got paid and what the jury was never told about Norman Hayer?
Yeah, so that actually, it's not, and I don't want to say it's only Norman Hayer, because I think that this was a predominant issue among all the, because this was a 500-year flood, and because the people that live in that area and farm that area are generational, there's no way to anticipate anything this big. It just wasn't. There had been floods obviously over time, but nothing like this. So they didn't have federal flood insurance through the Federal Emergency Management Agency, through FEMA. They did have homeowners policies on their homes and on their farms. So it's like, if you live in a hurricane zone, if you don't have special hurricane coverage and it's a named storm, you can't collect on that policy, or you're going to collect at a much higher premium through your homeowners, because there's certain policies you have to have. If you live in a floodplain, you have to have a special type of insurance. These guys didn't have it, and they didn't have it because there was never any reason to have it, because it never flooded everything out. I think that's part of the reason why they weaponized this case against one person, because if the levees were caused by the flood, you get nothing. If they're caused by a human vandalizing it, now you can collect on a homeowner's policy.
And the jury was told none of that, right? Like the angle about, hey, we get money if it wasn't caused by nature, but you get nothing if it's caused by nature, but you get all the money if it was be dependent on one guy.
Yeah, the jury didn't hear that, and to the extent, to my knowledge, the first time that was reported was in the book in 2007. The reason I knew about it, the follow the money guy, was actually a guy that worked for the Army Corps of Engineers who wouldn't. I use a pseudonym for him in the book. If you want to find his real name, I promise I wouldn't disclose it, but he did disclose it later in an interview he did with, I think it was with the Weather Channel, so it's out there. But he basically, he was like the deep throat. I mean, he gave me the information. He's like, follow the money. These guys collected. So there's a motive. There's more of a motive on, for the defense to prosecute the prosecutors than there were for them to prosecute James Scott.
That's what I mean. Like, what's the greater motive? Hey, I want to stay and party for a couple more hours with my buddies while my wife sits at home, or I'm going to get millions of dollars if it was this guy versus if it was a flood. That seems like a no-brainer to me. But play devil's advocate with me.
Sure.
You've sat with this case since '98. Given the motives from the state, given the one statement that, there was a statement that I read that he gave, I told you I was going to do it, the best evidence from the state. Steel manning that argument, dismantle it. Like, what's the obvious case for, obviously that's just a stupid idea. There's no way that went down at the hands of James Scott.
Yeah, two giant holes that you could poke in that. Number one, go to any levee on the Mississippi River, even not under flood stage, just in its current, the earth and sand levee on the entire stretch of the Mississippi River. I'm not going to encourage you to actually dig in it, but consider if you dug in it with your hands, or if there were sandbags, if you moved them.
Yeah.
If that water, the Mississippi River is gigantic. I mean, it's still in some parts, up to a mile in width.
Right.
And there's crazy currents and eddies. There's all kinds of debris and barges. There was actually 2 barges moored to trees. If that thing is going to blow out a levee, you're going with it. You're not coming back. You're not outrunning it. I mean, it's not Indiana Jones. You can't outrun this sort of flood. So that's part one. If he actually had caused it, it wouldn't just slowly, it would boom. And in fact, some of the eyewitnesses said that they knew it broke way downriver because they heard a pop, like a bomb went off. Of course, there was no bomb. There was no evidence. It just blew. That's part one.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but they're saying that the way that he went about it was by moving sandbags. That's how he destroyed
moved sandbags. It caused a trickle, and then he got off the levee, and then it just broke. Thing is, there was aerial coverage. There were airplanes flying overhead at the time. the reason they were there is pretty interesting. They were there waiting for it to break because they had been breaking like dominoes in sequence upriver, and this was just the next one. So they were already there waiting for it.
Did that ever make it to the jury?
The aerial images did, but in '93, you know, it's somebody with a camera shooting down, so you can't see a human. I would think that the defense should have used that. Like, where is he? You know, they could enhance it by now. But no, I mean, you could see the breach. The hole was big enough that a barge got sucked through it that had been moored to the trees, floated over the farm because it flooded and struck a gas station, and that went up in this fiery inferno. So to consider one person in the matter of minutes acting alone with no physical evidence, no shovel, no dynamite, no bulldozer, caused the Mississippi River to blow out this levee, considering bulldozers had been up and down it and trucks and people for weeks, that's incredulous. That's insane. The other main thing,
just quick question. Did nobody bring up the fact that, hey, the only reason these aerial images exist is because they were hovering over there because basically in anticipation that the thing was going to flood?
No.
Yeah, I think the defense might have been able to use that one. I don't know. It just seems like something for closing arguments or bringing in the people that were.
That if he had a proper appeal, you could probably point to maybe ineffectiveness of counsel. But the thing is, it's the court-appointed attorney. He got outclassed. I mean, that's the bottom line. But there's a second point, though, and this is really important, too, that hasn't been covered. If you go to the exact spot, even in 2026 in present day, where it broke, you'll see these giant limestone boulders. They're called riprap, and they're had to be trucked in. They're extremely expensive, and they're being used to reinforce the exact spot where it broke. If this levee were rock solid, as Norman Hare and the prosecution maintained at trial, and that it would not have failed but for James Scott, why go to the trouble of reinforcing this one area with boulders? And there's no other area anywhere on the Mississippi River, anywhere in between Iowa and Arkansas, that has this sort of reinforcement. You reinforce a weak spot. You don't reinforce a crime scene, and that's exactly what happened here.
Interestingly, I don't know if that would make it in a civil case against, say, the city, because evidence of remedial measures is not proof of like negligence or whatever. But in a criminal trial where they're basically taking remedial measures, accounting for the anticipated failings of the levee, it seems like that would be admissible evidence. And I'd push back too, just a little bit, because I heard you say that there was a state-appointed attorney. I know they get a bad rap, but at the same time, the state-appointed attorneys that I know are really freaking good. Like they're really good.
I really don't want to malign the guy. I think he did a great job considering the resources he had at his disposal. But he was going up against a pretty slick prosecutor that had not just the resources of the state government, also the federal government, because the Army Corps of Engineers was more than happy to ride the coattails out of this. It gets them out of the weeds for not maintaining the levee, and it also had across the river in Illinois all of their people defend. I mean, he was outgunned. There was no way that court-appointed attorney could have done anything.
Honestly, it feels like the plot from The Verdict. Paul Newman, going up against a crooked judge, a crooked prosecution, coached witnesses, and the whole thing. I don't even know if
he definitely with the judge in the sentencing. James Scott had never been convicted of any sex offense. He'd never been arrested for one, and the judge brought up wondering if James Scott breaks levees because he gets sexually aroused. It was such a
heard that.
Yeah, so the court, the Vice documentary captured it, but it's such a strange comment, not in context.
The clips of the judge in that Vice documentary are pretty shocking, honestly. I was like, oh my god, I can't believe he'd be so overtly kind of crazy. Why would you?
Literally said sexual arousal at the breaking of the levee or something to that effect.
A judge should not interject sexual imagery where it's not even brought up by any party. Like, that's insane.
In psychology, they call that projecting.
Yeah.
Just I know it's like almost 1 o'clock where you're at, but just to kind of bring this home, you've known James Scott for a long time now. I think he said the first time you met him, he was 24. He's now 56 years old. What have you observed in him that's changed over the course of the last 32 years?
He is. I give him. There's definitely been a seismic change, not just because of what 33 years in a level 5 max will do to you, but essentially they won. I mean, even if he gets paroled out, they already won. They took everything. Both his parents are dead. He lost a brother. His wife divorced him. Friends have disappeared. They've all dried up. I mean, after this much time, he would be basically. He'd be like Brooks in Shawshank. I mean, you release him out. There were no cell phones really, or at least not in popular use in '93, let alone all the other technology we have now. Yeah. So he'd be. Good news for him is that he has a trade. Long answer to a short question. The most noticeable thing is he's a humble guy. He doesn't swear. He doesn't drink. He doesn't smoke, even though you could actually get all that in prison, but he doesn't. He's honest. I mean, you can literally ask him about, and this is the measure of honesty. You can ask him about any other crime he ever did, even stuff he didn't get caught doing, and he'll tell you about it. Like he's changed. He knows at this point he's got nothing to lose. Like he's in prison, so he's trying to atone. But it's going to be an uphill climb.
You mentioned Brooks from Shawshank. I hope he's not Brooks from Shawshank. And I also heard
too, but I mean, it's a rough road to hoe.
Which brings my next question. Like Lauren had brought up a little bit earlier about his refusal to apologize. Like, I'm not apologizing for anything, and he's pretty astute or resolute in that stance. And I think you even asked him the question in the Vice documentary, like on camera. You asked him, "What if he just apologized?" And he's like, "For what? To get out, obviously." And then he says again, "For what? I'm not going to apologize for something that I didn't do." And then the follow-up is like, "Well, but if it means that you get the difference between getting out or staying in here," I mean, I can only imagine what the conversations must have been like off of camera. But what do you think about that whole?
I actually talked to him right after Lauren and I talked. He actually called and we talked, and I brought that up again because, I don't know how to coach. How do you coach somebody going in front of the parole board for the first time in 33 years? I don't know. And I've never been in front of one. And like Lauren said, I don't even know. For whatever reason, the Missouri Department of Corrections is still adhering to their COVID Zoom parole hearing policy, from what I hear. So I don't know.
Way to do that. It's annoying. I get it.
Yeah, but I even said to him, I was like, I'm still not convinced you shouldn't just. And if it were me, I'd just go there, apologize, and get out, and then fight it from the outside. Then try to clear your name from the outside. He won't do it.
Yeah.
He's like, what else can they take from me at this point? I mean, I'm not going down like that. I'm going out on my shield.
My understanding of that is if he's truly exhausted his appellate options, the only way he's getting a new shot at an appeal is with evidence, basically new evidence.
Either that or Brady or Supreme Court. I mean, I've been looking at again, I'm not a lawyer, but I guess I know enough just to basically maneuver around the system.
Yeah.
Brady appeal or the Supreme Court. That's really all I see. The Supreme Court challenging the sentence structure of a law like this and the legalities about a life sentence for property damage.
Mm-hmm.
So did he ask you specifically to sit in the room with him, not a lawyer?
Yeah, I didn't raise my hand. I mean, this is not a position I really want. I didn't ask for this. I came into this as a journalist, not as an advocate. And the only reason I'm advocating, two main reasons. Number one, because I can't, if he were guilty, I'd say I don't think I'd say leave him where he is now. I think too much time's passed. He probably should have rotated back by now. But if he were guilty, I would have bolted a long time ago. The main reason I'm sticking around is I cannot find guilt. Like the devil's advocate you were doing. Under no circumstances can you point to any. He was convicted on circumstantial evidence. There's 100 more circumstances you can point to that he didn't do it versus that he did. And the other reason I'm sticking around is I'm inspired by David Hammer. The scientist is still sticking around. He's never even met him. And he's sticking around because the prosecutor tried to impugn his reputation. This guy came back from Nam a hero. And he's still just incensed by it all.
So going forward, He's got this appeal coming up on the 8th, or not the 8th, the 22nd, 8 days from now.
That's right.
And there seems to be now a groundswell of people trying to bring attention to his case. That's why me and Lauren are here doing this live stream with you, among many others. I'm sure we're not going to be the last person stream that you do. Is there any headway with any other organization, Innocence Project, that are willing to take on this case and try to work to bring him justice?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there are some organizations that are kind of dancing. The problem is the Innocence Project or any of these other well-heeled organizations are staying away from it, not because they don't believe him, because you can't disprove it because it was never proved in the first place. Like they usually work with DNA or something that they could show irrefutable scientific evidence of innocence.
Yeah.
This is impossible to prove innocence because they didn't prove guilt. So like, it's not like you could say that shovel couldn't have caused it because there's no shovel. It's not like you could say that dynamite couldn't have caused a big enough hole because there's nothing there. So they're staying away from it. But what's interesting too, there's a groundswell. This kind of gets to the point Lauren made earlier. The social media, it's blowing up on social media. I've had people, I'm not huge on social media, but I've had people reach out like, you're trending right now. I'm like, cool, man, if it gets them out. But the irony is I do believe that a big part of his conviction was the media. I think all the legacy media, in particular, the 3 networks, the New York Times, Washington Post, the Associated Press, the 2 biggest culprits, the St. Louis Post-Dispatch and the Quincy Herald-Whig, they had no problem doing all these stories about James Scott all throughout both trials, and then they'll do some hit and runs from time to time. I've reached out to all of them. I talked to 2 of them about doing an op-ed. We got really close, and then all of a sudden they're like, sorry, it's not for us. They won't touch it. They're kind of like the prosecution. All their people won't talk about it. Legacy media won't revisit it. So it's going to be now it's this next generation. It is the people on social and podcasters and people with platforms that are non-traditional. That's why it's really ginned up.
One of the things I'm interested in, Rosalind Duke has the same question. Is there any possibility of Brady violations? You had mentioned that that's kind of really the only avenue he really has other than some other sentencing scheme. But is there any headway, or has there been anybody really trying to take on whether or not they could find a Brady violation?
No.
Yeah.
Not yet. I mean, the issue is that is a long process. Even if they find it, by the time it works its way through the courts, we're talking about more years. So to the extent that I talked to lawyers over the years, just because I'm not a lawyer, I was like, hey, I can hand you over a ton of evidence and then do with it what you want. The problem is it will take years. It takes resources. The money's not there. People that want to take it pro bono, by the time they started looking at it, he had a couple of years left until his first parole hearing. They're like, at this point, you might as well play it out, and then you could revisit it because we wouldn't get it in the courts in time.
Yeah, and that's really hard because all the people that were involved in this it was in the 90s. It's almost 30 years ago. It was 30 years ago. 30 plus years at this point.
33 years he's been in.
Yeah.
Can I just say one other point that kind of it gets to what you were talking about. Like everybody outside of this area sees the flaws in the case. The main critique that the people from Quincy had about the Vice documentary, the reason that really kind of ruffled their feathers, is they say it was one-sided and slanted. That's almost by design. It wasn't purposely one-sided. It's just the other side that never came out. Even my book didn't take the other side because that was objective. So this is actually the first time his side has actually gotten out. I think they just resent the fact that it's not all slanted like it had been for decades.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Basically, they're refusing to participate. And so therefore, if it gives the appearance of one-sidedness, it's by no fault of your own. They're simply not participating. What it sounds like. But let me ask you a question. If this parole is denied on the 22nd, when is he up for parole, or how is that process work in Missouri?
Well, that's an interesting question because he was supposed to have had 3 hearings by now, and without explanation, they kept kicking the can down the road. So I don't know. He was supposed to originally have a parole in 2011, then they moved it to 2022, and then they moved it to 2026. The only explanation I could find, at one point they say that the sentencing structure under that crime, or the way that they treat life is, when he was sentenced, it was supposed to be 30 years before your first parole hearing. Once he would, but they changed the law and didn't grandfather him in to 50 years. So, but it still doesn't make sense because he's going up after 33 years. If you could get it out of MODOC, the Missouri Department of Corrections, I mean, I can't get it. I can't get a straight answer. And the lawyers I talk to don't really know. It's such a, because he's still the only one. He's still patient A. Like, there's no one else to measure this up against.
Honestly, this sounds bizarre. So he was first up for parole in 11.
But he never got that opportunity. He just got a
They
letter
kicked it
saying,
to 22 and then to 26, just haphazardly say, hey, sorry, man, your parole date is going to be in 2022 now.
Well, it wasn't even that gentle. It wasn't sorry, man. It was, your parole hearing has moved. I mean, that's it. You got a letter in the mail and that's it.
How do you go from 11 to 22?
I don't know.
That feels like forever, like over 10 years.
Well, I mean, so that gets to, what Omar was saying. I'm trying not to be a conspiracy theorist, but why is a nonviolent offender who has no infractions in prison watching murderers in the revolving door, watching them come and go while he's still there? I mean, he is in a place with murderers, rapists, sodomy, like the worst of the worst. He's in the level 5, so he sees them all.
So, Adam, is there anything that you want to say that you haven't already said in this interview?
No, I'm just grateful that you're picking it up. I know people in California and in the West, this might seem like a moonwalk to them. The agrarian Midwest is far, far away, but to consider this, I think your wildfire point was a good one. If this can happen in Missouri, it could happen anywhere. If there's a community and they don't like you and they kind of circle the wagons, unless you have deep pockets, you better be prepared to do all the time, because they'll keep you there. I mean, that's who the system's for.
I mean, imagine the Palisades fires. I mean, that just happened a few years ago. Somebody's going to prison for life because of a faulty bolt that was supposed to be replaced in the 60s, and it was still holding up everything in 2021 or whenever it was, 22. Omar, do you have any other questions?
Me? No, I think, Adam's pretty much laid it all out there. I can't think of anything.
No, it's going to be 1 a.m. for Adam, so I think we're going to let Adam go.
Right,
Adam, thank you so much for joining us. Awesome interview, by the way. And I got to tell you, you said that you were going to kind of like run out or fade out because it was so late. But I think you did a really good job. You had me compelled. Matter of fact, I came in just as tired as you, and even that late. But you
guys were talking. I was kind of minding the live chat, and I got our friend Rosalind here is also a YouTuber, and she was like, I'm interested in covering this story. So I sent her an email with that info with the Vice documentary and all that. So every time you talk, it's making a little bit of impact. Yeah.
Look, I mean, hopefully, I just hope this energy, this is indicative of what it's felt like. When I've had an opportunity to have an outlet, I'm happy to talk about it because it's hard to get the message out there. And by the way, I should also mention the book's out of print. This isn't to sell books. Like, it never was about that. So I challenge any of the YouTubers to try to get any of the people from the prosecution to go on the record, because
well, hey, might as well just start inquiring, sending them some inquiries. Let's see what we could do, all at the same time, and they could know that something's up. I don't know.
Or at least try to get any of the legacy media that was all too quick to cover it in the 90s to do their follow-up, the long overdue follow-up.
Hey, let's do the 30-year follow-up. How's James Scott? Matter of fact, how's the state prosecutor doing nowadays? How's that insurance guy doing? The guy with the financial interest. By the way, how do he pay for that house that he's living in? Why don't we start asking those questions? Anyway, folks, Adam, thank you so much for joining. I think we're going to call it a night. And for those of you that want to know more about the story, Adam, where could they learn more? I know you wrote a book about it. You have a whole Vice documentary. You want to talk a little bit about that before we go?
Yeah, you can go to YouTube to see the Vice documentary. It was produced by a very talented documentary maker. Her name's Neidigh Anthony. She's actually working on part 2 right now. She's actually in Quincy as we speak, doing even more sleuthing. So go to YouTube, Google Overlooked and Vice, and you'll find that. The book's out of print, but it's still in libraries. You can always look at it there. And then if you Google Adam Pitluk and James Scott, I've written a bunch of stuff over the years. There's stuff out there. But I think this is probably as definitive as it gets. You hit all the legal points that have been overlooked for 3 decades.
Well, I've had a case for 2 days, so.
Yeah, imagine if you would have been on it all these years.
All right, folks. I love you all. We will see you next time. Have a good night. Adam, thanks for joining us. Have a wonderful night. And
Thanks,
Lauren, as always, you know what you know what I'm gonna say.
Yeah.
All right. You guys have a wonderful night. Bye-bye.
You too. Thank you.
See you.